Hello and welcome to another episode of Connecting with Kinetic. I'm your host, Jake, and today I'm joined by two very special and gorgeous guests, Max Luck, head of growth at Flare, and Nick Campion, head of marketing at Flare. How are you both? How is our gorgeous bunch today?
We're feeling particularly gorgeous. Thank you very much for that introduction.
That is the most generous introduction I think I've ever had
It's
anywhere
quite possibly.
in my life. So thanks, Jake.
I feel
be
I
here.
feel
Feel free
a
to
little
introduce us.
I feel a little outclassed. I said gorgeous bunch, including myself. That might have been a bit bold of me. But don't worry, I'm
Never.
going to get a bunch of plastic surgery after this and going to Photoshop my new face over the video. So
Oh gosh.
we'll stop the comments there that you don't, Jake doesn't belong in the gorgeous bunch. I belong. Just hold on. I'm going to look
You
just
belong,
like
mate.
one of the
You
Bogdanovs.
belong.
We're all here and it's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us on the show.
Of course. I mean, this is the end goal, to get people that actually work at Flare to talk about Flare.
Yeah, apologies, it's taken a little while to be able to join. There's been an awful lot going on, as you can imagine.
Yeah, there's Web3 does not sleep, and it doesn't let you sleep either.
Yes. Me and Max nodding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are we? What's my name again?
Yeah, it's rough out here. So for people who may not be familiar, could you tell us a bit about the distinction between the head of growth and the head of marketing roles? So how do those two differ, and are there any places where they align?
Go on, Nick. You go for this, and then I'll
Sure.
attempt to chime in.
Well, we work together very closely, but within, I guess, what we would call the wider ecosystem team. But my role and the people that work with me are very much more focused on the brand and the communications and how we reach out on a day-to-day basis to the wider audience and are introducing new people to Flare. And then Max is more on the, I guess, business side. You might call it in a more traditional sales and marketing type separation. Would that be fair, Max?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, overall, my role really is to help bring projects to build on Flare to kind of keep an eye on all of the different kind of opportunities that are arising in the space and select the right kind of projects across like infrastructure applications that align kind of with where we're heading towards as a chain, the kinds of use cases that we can fulfill with the data and the enshrined oracles, to make sure that we really give our community a great place to kind of be, like hang out, great place to use the dApps. So yeah, it's quite a broad scope, and I think that's probably why Nick and I find ourselves running around quite a bit. There's lots of conference attendance, and there's a lot of opportunities to meet incredible builders. We just finished at ETH Oxford, and then I feel like I ran around somewhere before I got here. But it's been a great journey so far.
Would you say, Max, that there's a core philosophy with how you approach your role at Flare?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think there is. It's that it's important to maintain the openness to realize when opportunities are standing right in front of you, and to be able to think about how different partners might work together, how like sometimes there can be quite interesting out of the box thinking that might make use of your tech in a unique way, and trying to kind of retain that agility to really move quickly and make sure that you create a place for developers to come and build, or potentially it could be even with, so we're starting to work with some of the blockchain um, academies and schools around the world. Like that's not something necessarily that we might have considered, but it's something that jumped out as an opportunity and was like, oh gosh, you know what? That's a no-brainer. And philosophically, they're aligned. They're trying to find sets of builders to do interesting things on chains, really paying attention to the native technology that they can make use of, and figuring out ways to create unique applications to kind of harness those builds. That's kind of, yeah. I don't know if I really answered your question. I sort of
No, you did, and then it's got me thinking. Something that, and I'm sure anybody who works in anything that connects people, marketing, sales, has run into that, and it's about staying receptive. And sometimes it can be really, really difficult to stay receptive and not get so far down your own hallway of whatever goal you've got that you're working on that you're missing other stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
and also just the sheer scale of development that takes place in this space. I swear it was just the summer DeFi, and we were like looking at like retroactive airdrops from Uniswap, and then suddenly it was like Olympus DAO and gosh, was it what was that wonderful protocol that launched with the self-repaying loans? Those kinds of protocols of like the DeFi 2.0 kind of phase, and now we're sort of dealing with restaking and the whole like wonders of eigenlayer and Bitcoin L2s. It's like just keeping up with the development is quite tricky. So maintaining an eye on the ball there and sort of seeing how that's relevant to the chain that you're kind of representing and aiming to build out. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, the time scale in Web3 is incredibly
Something else.
confusing.
That's why Nick and I look like this. Hello,
We both joined Flare about the same time, maybe slightly more than 2 years ago. So this is 2 years of launching a blockchain.
That's what it does to you. It makes you gorgeous.
Yeah.
We've still got a gorgeous butt.
Exactly.
Well, that actually ties into my next question, which is I'm always interested to learn not only what people thought of blockchain before to now, but also how people got started working in Web3. Because a lot of people are really interested in Web3. I was interested in Web3 for a long time before I started working there, and there's a really big difference between being kind of I guess, a fan or a speculator, investor, whatever, and working in the industry.
Yeah, and also whether you're working at a layer one or a genuinely deep tech end of blockchain versus working at an exchange where you're no criticism. Of course, you don't need to understand the technology. You're not trying to communicate the technology. You're still heavily involved with community. You're creating good vibes, but your communication tasks, challenges, and your value proposition is so much easier to communicate. So working with a layer one or working with a layer two or that kind of deep tech is incredibly fascinating because you are working with some of the most insanely intelligent people that you are ever likely to sit down with or have a conversation with. But you've also somehow got to distill this like incredible juice that's coming out of their brains into something that's going to make sense to someone who doesn't have a PhD or someone who may have only started getting interested in blockchain like 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And it's a fascinating challenge. And Flare is at the more academic end of the spectrum. We're not a big hypey brand. There's no smoke and mirrors. We only talk when there's actually something important to say. But we still need to make sure that we are making that as accessible as possible, that we're not confusing people, because we want to take people on our journey. We're super excited about what we're building. And we've got to make sure that in our excitement, we don't just start using unnecessary long words and we confuse the hell out of everybody.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I'm sure it's a huge challenge when you kind of are put, I'm the role of managing communication, getting people excited, and now people are going to start seeing me as, because I'm representing these people, as an expert, and it's real hard to be a true expert in this in Web3 and all these different technologies, and like we've been talking about, like things are changing every month. Like it's insane. So kudos to you guys. How did you each of you first get involved working for Web3? Like, was there a starting point, or was it kind of just like I'm interested in this, I'm going to try to get a job?
can go
Nick,
first.
you want to go? Yeah, you go for it.
So I personally got involved in blockchain probably 5 or 6 years ago, early enough to lose a whole bunch of money on ohm forks and all that kind of behavior. It's always nice when you go back on debanked and it still records all of your terrible failures that you played with earlier. But I was living in Australia and I was on a sponsored visa, so there was no way that anyone was ever going to sponsor me at a blockchain company. So for all of my desires to work, I needed a bit of luck, which was a bit later. I got married, which meant that I could change my Australian visa and was permanent resident, which actually meant I could work for anyone. Suddenly was free to talk to blockchain companies. And I had a very good meeting with the head of ecosystem at Flare, who was an old colleague who I hadn't seen for years. But it was perfectly timed where I was trying desperately to get out of a rather a less than ideal job that I found myself in, and they were looking for a head of marketing. So I had a good conversation with Hugo. I think the fact I've got a bit of an academic background. I might have worked in advertising marketing for years, but I studied chemistry at university. Both my parents were physics teachers, like a bookish type background, nerdy, all of that stuff. So I was able to persuade Hugo that I was a marketeer with a level of substance and not just or someone that could align with the Flare brand and how Flare wanted to communicate itself.
Sure. Which, I as we've talked about, I want to, because I'm more familiar with this type of stuff, right? As far as the layer ones I'm interested in, they're usually tech focused. And in talking with a lot of the leadership, Hader's one example, they feel very, very constrained by, and these are marketing people, by not only regulation, which I'm sure is massive,
Yeah.
right, but keeping that tone that we're focusing on, new developments, we're focusing on technology, but you don't always have something to say. So trying to keep that interesting while not appearing to, just want to pump things up, I'm sure is difficult. Were you always interested in blockchain? I mean, before you started working there, were you a fan or?
Yeah, 100%. So I worked in advertising for years, like various places around the world, and advertising agencies are renowned for wanting to jump on the latest piece of tech to try and sell it in as this crazy cool new idea. So yes, had a level of experience trying to pitch blockchain into clients that were totally uninterested and were like, no, that's a ridiculous idea. Why would we ever do that? We're talking in the 2015s, 2016, like slightly earlier on than thankfully we've got brands jumping in now. And then I educated myself from that point forward. And then I guess I finally took the plunge a couple of years later when it became a little bit easier and you didn't need to like take cash or mail cash to an exchange.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, that's it. It's doesn't feel like that much time has passed, but in the weird time chamber we seem to find ourselves, that's like 20 years. What about you, Max? How did you kind of like find your way into this weird world?
Well, uh, I'd say not particularly similarly to Nick. I didn't have sort of an experience of working in advertising as such, but at the time where I really discovered digital assets, I was in a band and we were using effectively the Twitch and Discord platforms to growth hack a community. We were noticed that we were quite good at street performing. We used to do it in San Francisco and used to um, have sort of quite good sales numbers of CDs and merch. And we decided to take it online to growth hack it. Um, and we started receiving donations. You could either pay 30% to Twitch to buy their native currency, or you could just put up an OX address and receive Ethereum. So we started to receive donations. My sister and I were in a band, And then we had some large donations in crypto, and we noticed that there was this trend around 2017. There was more interest in digital assets, and I guess kind of the journey that they'd been on. I started to learn a bit more about the space, but didn't really fall down the rabbit hole until the summer of DeFi, which kind of coincided with COVID and also coincided with an opportunity to really pivot from my role as a singer-songwriter kind of back towards my background, which was an economist. I read economics back when I was a kid. I'd say some element of me is still a kid, and there's definitely times, like for instance, we did this hackathon at the Oxford Institute of Mathematical Studies. It might just be the Institute of Mathematics or the Mathematical Institute. And we decided that we were going to participate in the hackathon because we had sort of shipped a reasonable amount of tech, and we had the opportunity to offer people a kind of a bridge track and such. And I think that's where I kind of, during the summer of DeFi, was where I fell down the rabbit hole, properly pivoted, learned about sort of members of the Ethereum community, such as sort of Andrew Cronje and obviously Stani launching what was ETHLend and became Aave at the beginning of that year, and sort of really started learning about the possibilities, the transparency that was offered by digital assets. And after experiencing 2008 firsthand, the Bitcoin white paper really resonated. And so that was kind of the start of my journey. I then joined a DeFi protocol, which was a logical next step in community growth and kind of marketing, and went from there.
No, it's really interesting. And I'm always surprised, but also reassured that every time I do one of these interviews, I find that there's some creative and artistic background to the people I talk to, because that's something very strange that I've noticed across the board with Web3 in talking to people is, we're in a very technology focused space, but there's always a lot of people who are very artistic. And, I was talking to Nick from Enosis, and, he's very, very, very
It's
into
awesome.
various
He's
aspects
got
of
a good
art.
story.
Yeah, he's got a great story. And, it's always reassuring because I have a creative background. I have a MFA in fine arts.
Oh, awesome.
And yeah, well, and sometimes I'm just like, how did I get here? I feel like I got pulled in by
I think
something,
we all
or
get here. Yeah.
yeah, it's this weird tornado of energy. And I think a lot of people who are creative mindset, artistic mindset, just kind of see this this energy going on, and want to be a part of it. So going back to your time at Flare and working at Flare, is there one specific moment that you would say is kind of something you're really proud of, or kind of just a favorite part of your journey, something that really for you is kind of a good memory?
Nick, am I right to jump in here?
Go for your life.
I think sort of meeting the team and all participating together, working together when we actually were coordinating the token distribution event was really quite special, because up until that point, I hadn't had a huge amount of contact with the rest of the team. And it was a really nice opportunity to gather and sort of share stories, meet your fellow colleagues in the flesh in a sort of a non-office environment, but still in a quite sort of, I'd say, highly pressured and quite high stakes and quite high risk situation that required quite well coordinated execution in order to deliver. But it was really cool. Kind of reminded me of why it's so awesome to be able to work in person as well as kind of really buckle down in terms of, like, I don't know, we all work remotely, which is very good for focus and getting through huge amounts of tasks asynchronously, but also coordinating in person. So that's probably like one of my highlights.
We talked about the tornado of energy. The token distribution event was a tornado of energy, and we did it in Slovenia, of all places, because there's a good proportion of our development team that resides in Slovenia. So it made sense, given there was there was a whole bunch of stuff going up right to the wire, as you can imagine, with blockchain. Make sure everything is delivered perfectly seamlessly. You can't see all the chaos going on underneath the table. But yeah, that would have been one of my highlights as well, for both the reason that Max said, in the sense of it was this wonderful coming together and just milestone in delivery. We'd both been there for more than a year at that point. But also, excuse me, selfishly, that was the point when our social media started becoming nice to be in again. And I'll say this a bit carefully, like we that was where we got the point where we delivered the tokens, where we got the community back on side. So it was a much more positive. People stopped shouting when flare at us every 30 seconds. And yes, when flare, fair enough. But then flare, thankfully. And that made, just from a purely selfish point, made my job a whole lot more fun to do when everyone was nice to us when we put some stuff out.
Oh, I 100% understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. And we understand, like, community is one of the best things about working in blockchain. Like I said, I've got this long history of working in advertising. I've done ads for, like, I used to look after the sports FIFA, the computer game. I did that for years, working with footballers, etc. Launched Audi TT globally. And these kind of brands would dream, like couldn't even in fact dream of the kind of community engagement that we get and the kind of activation and like positivity that happens on a trip. I've spent far too long in my previous career trying to figure out how to create this kind of community activation, and it was never going to happen because people just don't care enough. But when you get into blockchain, that is one of the most wonderful things about being part of the space. And I guess big shout out to the Flare community. Perfect opportunity. Thank you for doing what you do. Like, we're persistently and consistently amazed at how well you educate yourself on what is quite a complicated piece of technology, and then how you also take the time to educate others. So thank you very much.
Actually, that is quite a key point. Is I feel like in blockchain, there's a term I heard when I first started working in the space, which I hadn't heard before, which is autodidact. And I like the word because it sounds sort of complicated. And I think I've got used to that since I've been at Flare. But it's the sort of the pursuit of knowledge that you kind of kickstart yourself by way, I guess it starts with curiosity, and then it sort of becomes something more, and there's a lot of kind of discovery, and ultimately we're all humans in this world, and we're just sort of discovering new ways of coordinating ourselves, data in this kind of data driven world that we live in, and kind of the opportunity that digital assets offer, especially with regards to sort of custodying your own assets, which is still, I think, one of the main reasons why I'm excited about the space, and why I wanted to be part of a layer one team and have the privilege of actually being present and part of the coordinating team to launch a layer one network. Huge milestone in my life. And I'm sure that I will look back in years to come and be like, whoa, that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, the Web3 community across the board is very unique. The amount of people who are, extremely hungry for information, as we've all experienced, but do want to consume it, do want to integrate it, and then start talking about it themselves. It's very strange, but very wonderful at the same time. Can you guys talk a little bit about this big, massive, awesome upcoming news, which is the FTSO V2 upgrade, and tell me about all the amazing benefits that it's going to bring to our lovely Flare network? Nick, do you want to take it? Or?
Who wants to go? So FTSO V2 is a fundamentally very important piece of the puzzle that we're building, the blockchain for data. We want to give developers access to as much data as they can possibly have to be able to create the dApps that either don't exist yet or aren't possible using existing data acquisition technology, so that we can bring this kind of emerging opportunities onto Flare. And FTSO v2 is, and we've already had one governance proposal, which was about a month ago, which passed with about 99.9% or something. And that enables FTSO scaling, which is the first part of FTSO v2. And that will enable us to increase the number of data feeds that we provide developers from. We were at 18, and we're going to be able to go up to 1,000, which is clearly, that just opens up the aperture on what we can provide, from stocks to weather to basically you name it, anything that varies over time, and that there's a variety of data sources. The next governance proposal, which is going to be in the latter half of April, is on FTSO fast updates. And that was what was described in the blog and white paper earlier this week. And that is where it will enable developers, dApps, to access data on a per block basis, which means every single one of the 1,000 or up to 1,000 variable feeds will be available every block, which means approximately 1 to 2 seconds, which just, that gets us to product market fit in terms of so many more dApps or use cases, or it just means that there's so much more that you can do and build. And the most important thing, at least in my opinion, is that we've done that in a decentralized fashion, whereas some of our, well, decentralized and permissionless, but some other oracles might not be quite so decentralized, or not as decentralized as Flare. So if you're building a really high value use case, you're building something where data latency is incredibly important, and you don't want to incorporate any centralized point of failure, you don't want to incorporate anything that might have censorship risk, then Flare is a good way of mitigating those potential risks and building with that low latency and censorship resistant data.
So, I mean, we're all excited about this kind of blossoming of DeFi on Flare that, is, I mean, in my opinion, is set to happen. I mean, I work for Kinetic, which obviously we're expecting.
You're a big part of it, yeah.
Right, we're expecting this blossom to happen. So, we need that FTSO to be ready and able to accept it when that kind of explosion happens. So, I'm very excited about it. Wrapping up, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. The gorgeous bunch, we lead busy lives. But why don't each of you talk a little bit about what your vision is for the future of Flare, either in general or specifically to your role? Why don't we start with Max?
Sure. I think Flare, when it was initially sort of ideated or conceived, was designed to provide smart contract functionality for non-smart contract tokens. When that technology was being built over the past, years, it was discovered that the technology could be used to do sort of many more things than had initially been conceived. And I think with the sort of the landscape shifting as it is, the importance of having decentralized data, like Nick was talking about, data that's acquired trustlessly with a large set of providers participating in that data provision independently, incentivized effectively to compete against each other to provide the most reliable prices. When you have those mechanisms in place, I think it paves the way for an interesting system that provides an alternative to the current status quo of the centralized world. And I think Flare is gradually seeing more and more relevance for its technology in terms of providing proofs alongside the price data, proofs of state of external chains, which is important for interoperability, and also of kind of external APIs, the methodologies of kind of performing the Merkle tree hash, reaching consensus over it, and then proving that and enabling it to come to Flare is an interesting system, and it relies on this whole kind of integrated or enshrined Oracle network functioning and inheriting that security of the network. I think that Flare is gradually proving its relevance in providing that proofing set of mechanisms, and will serve as that utility layer to enable data and value to move trustlessly throughout the blockchain ecosystem, and really have the kind of the reassurance of trustless decentralization, on-chain mechanics, and kind of maintaining the Nakamoto principles that's required for this space to kind of move forward in a balanced way. I see Flare as a connecting chain, as a sort of a utility layer or a universal layer for the industry, and as a hopefully as a way of providing more stability to enable the space to grow. So that's my dream, is to see really that usage taking place and playing out over the coming years.
I mean, that's a very hopeful vision. It's getting me excited. All right, Nick, beat that one.
I mean, I would 100% echo it. So Max talked about Flare as a potential utility layer. When we look at where blockchain already has product market fit, it's realistically, we've proven as an industry that people like to speculate, people like to gamble. We're all a bunch of degenerate so-and-sos that are willing to ape into X, Y, and Z. And that's use case number one. The world didn't know before blockchain that so many people just wanted to speculate and have easy access to speculation. That's what the current meme coin, I guess, renaissance is showing again, as if we'd forgotten. And then stablecoins as the second use case. But what we want is, we want more utility. We want more usage. We want stuff that is going to be relevant to people's daily lives. We want to bring new people into blockchain. We want to increase the total addressable market. And honestly, data as a thesis, we've been plowing this furrow for the longest time, and I guess it's easier to jump on a trend, but Flare never jumped on a trend. It was like, this is what we believe. This is where we're going. Data is going to become more and more important. We're going to fundamentally focus on building out these decentralized protocols so we can do data better than anyone else. And thankfully, we were not wrong. Thankfully, that has been proven out. And the importance of data for whether it's real world assets, whether it's going to be for machine learning, AI, is going to keep increasing. But if we want to, I guess, if we want to bring more people into Flare, and if we want to increase that addressable market, data literally has an infinite TAM, right? If you think of the petaflops or whatever gigabytes of data that exists in storage across the globe, buried under the Antarctic or wherever, there is an astonishing potential for creating new usage models, new monetization models around some of this data, and creating, yes, with blockchain probably being invisible, not being that you don't want it to be where we are now. There's still UX problems, but where we will get to, where blockchain is basically invisible and people are actually using it and it has function, and like your mum, your dad, people down the pub, it's something that is relevant for them. And that is where the utility layer, that is where bringing more data, making more data available to people to use on blockchain is like a lofty vision, but I see it as entirely achievable.
I forget who said this, but I thought it was poignant and goes to your point. I want the technology to be like electricity, right? Where it's you plug in, you get power, you get the utility. And based on what you guys have been saying about, handling data, I mean, that's going to be when things really send off, right? Is when it's just like we plug in because we need to. So very exciting stuff. And maybe we can bring you guys back to talk about this later. But I'm really excited about the potential with AI, and we're gonna. I'd be very surprised if we didn't start relying more and more on those how that data is processed. And right now it's very centralized, and getting that to a point where it can be decentralized will probably help a lot with the efficiency, because I don't think it's going away, unfortunately. For some, I mean, I like making cats that are on fire pictures, but I'm sure some people are scared by the technology. But I had a great time with this interview. Thank you both for coming. I thought it was great. I don't know why I'm rating my interview before it finished, but I think we all did a great job.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us also.
Yeah, thanks for having us on the show, Jake.
No, absolute pleasure. I'm trying to figure out a good way to end things. Haven't figured out a good way. I think maybe I'll just force everybody to wave. Maybe that'll work. Okay, cool.
I'm gonna get some balloons.
Ooh.
There you go.
There you go.